one thing I wanted to ask a bit more. Perhaps we should ask about this sort of aesthetically. If you were thinking of, say, the cover, or atmospheric art, or your imagery of what's going on, is there a common aesthetic that just works for you for this game? I mean, the one that seems to you to fit the most, the one you would prefer to use when you play.
Yeah, I actually found an artist, but and he was really excited about the project and was going to start doing some art. But then, sometimes things come up and people lose passion for the project. So I'm still wondering if that's going to move forward. But the artist does these character portraits
Mm-hmm.
where the characters, for whatever reason, he's really good at capturing emotions in the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
You know how a lot of character portraits are kind of dead in the eyes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Uh, uh, his characters, they may not be like the most interesting or creative looking characters, but they're highly emotive.
Right. Right.
And so I wanted, and then also his brush strokes are very they have like a kind of like furtive energy to them.
Interesting. I'd like to see that. That's hard to visualize from just the words, but I do like the implication that the characters are not just standing there in stiff portrait mode.
Right.
Right.
So the idea was that I wanted each character to since he's really good at portraying emotion, I wanted each character to just a lot of character art in the book uh, portraying the emotions of people in dire situations, just to really get across the emotional context
Right.
of what the game is.
Yes. It is, I think, a good idea to get away from the perhaps tendency from digital gaming that your characters are always in kind of black ops, commando, emotional competence, get the job done mode.
Yeah.
And they all have that kind of, for lack of a better word, sort of militaristic determination going on as the squad in action. And that's all you get. That's all you have.
Yeah.
So that's kind of good. All right. Well, I was thinking also in terms of, as I was saying, the aesthetics. I mean, do you see play as being full of shadow? Do you see it being uh, is sort of a woodcut style, or more of a uh, you know pulp illustration style, or maybe more like naturalistic airbrush style? Do you see what I mean? I'm just kind of spitballing about the different ways people have illustrated
Yeah. So
stuff.
as far as harsh technique goes, I hadn't figured out exactly what I want, other than finding an artist that was a motive of the mood
Right.
I was trying to get across. And the artist I found that I'm still working on to try to get my first cover. We're working on the cover first, and he's got the brief and everything, but he just
Oh, okay.
hasn't submitted.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't submitted any sketches yet. But the there's definitely a lot of shadow work in what it is, because the title is Heroic Dark, and
Right. Right.
shadows are the kind of number one way to portray darkness. So shadows was going to be a big part of it. And then it's interesting you mentioned woodcut, because I was choosing I was doing a lot of logo and line work,
Mm-hmm.
and it was kind of having a I don't know why I chose that aesthetic, but it was having an inky woodcut look.
Cool. All right.
So looks like it was
based on our discussion. It was the first thing that came to my mind. So that's super cool.
Thank you. Yeah, so that's what I'm doing as far as logo. Let me see if I can find that artist. So I can, but I mean, I may not end up working with him in the end.
Right, yeah, maybe let's hold off on that because we don't want to, embarrass the dude by, if you
Yeah,
end up not working with him for whatever reason. It's so that matters, and in many ways, it just helps me visualize while we talk, but it also will, as things continue, be more and more and more your touch point for what decisions you're going to make design wise. It's very difficult to describe. I'm sure you've been through it before, that as you go along, sooner or later you're making decisions, especially fine-grained ones about resolution or options or how to set up scenarios or anything like that. And you're working on how to present it, you're working on what the substance of the rules will be. And I find that revisiting the aesthetic is crucial at that point.
yeah,
Because otherwise, you go wandering off some other fucking road and imitate some other game that has nothing to do with this one. And,
yeah.
So.
Believe it or not, that logo, not that final version, but the sketch of the logo was the first thing I made when I had the idea of the game.
I don't blame you at all. I often have a bit of a personal board that I make while working on a game. And even if it's a picture that I have no rights to and could not possibly use in the game, but it's just important to me in thinking about it, I'll just keep that up. Sometimes I'll even make it my browser background and just keep it there. And that way it's kind of there hovering for me to feel comfortable with as I think about, well, okay, now how much damage does an axe do?
Mm-hmm.
And yet somehow having that picture helps me. And so that's kind of why I was checking in on that. It's actually a process question.
Yeah. And I actually had 2 points of process that brought me to where I am in the game. One was this sort of dichotomy aesthetic that I have in the logo.
Yes.
And then the other is I've been doing a lot of Scrum at work. Are you familiar with Scrum?
No, I know what the word means, but I didn't know it was an acronym or a thing. And
it's a product development methodology that's meant to be like a lightweight framework that's very high on transparency.
Okay.
And so I decided I wanted my game to be the same way. Since my game is meant to be basically it's highly structured in terms of what you're trying to accomplish. You're trying to tell a story of heroes fighting darkness with the possibility of losing it all.
Mm-hmm.
So I just try to structure that as much as possible, but then leave it as a lightweight framework, so that way every other organic element of what you're trying to do easily flows into it. And one of the things that I pulled off that looks strange to people who don't understand the choice, but works really well when you understand the choice, is Scrum really likes the Fibonacci sequence.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
For prioritization purposes, you're like, oh, this task is only worth 1 point. This task is worth 13 points. This task,
and it's kind of nice because you're basing it on comparison with the other tasks. In order to assess that, you can say, wow, this task is a real bear. That would be like doing all 3 of those tasks,
Yeah.
And so they add up on each other. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So if that's an interesting idea, and it's the kind of thing that remains very internal, because exactly what it means to you relative to the game design is only known to you ultimately, and the user of the game needs not know this. But it's nice to have such things. I do think that's a big deal. The only other thing I wanted to ask you about with the game was, what are your thoughts on in the moment ordering of input? If we have a particularly complex situation, and let's just say that it is rather important to me that this building not burn down, and it is also very dangerous if we are plunged into darkness. This particular foe is not great for fighting us in the dark. We would not be happy. And also situation is such that, you know what? I love y'all, but this is a pretty bad situation. We lost that last round. We've seen the darkness growing. And we need a win here. We need a win here real bad. And if one of you has to go for us to get the win, I'll send flowers.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say we're kind of in that situation, and we've got the four of us. We've got the lurking foe. We've got the more explicit adversary. And we also have some people there who might be on our side if we don't fuck everything up.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, it's pretty important. Things go badly at one point, and violence ensues. There is a lantern on the table that will, has flammables in it. And different people are going to do different things. Shoot, maybe one of us is more effective in the darkness. Who knows? Is somebody jumping to knock over the lantern? Is someone else jumping to stop that person? Is somebody else going to make an attack, but somebody else is trying to dissuade that person without hurting them? And yet another person is like, shoot, no matter what, that guy's got to go. He's nothing but a problem.
Yeah.
I'm taking him out.
Yeah.
Ordering of this kind of thing in role-playing has a particularly bad history.
Yes.
There are really not that many games that order in such a fashion as to be compelling. Usually, I just had this big discussion with Justin. Most rules are patches to handle Merc, or they introduce features of narrative that we all just sigh and say, well, I guess that's role-playing. I guess that's how it has to work.
Mm-hmm.
I have challenged that in my designs very, very deliberately. Order, action, change up of order, the role of commitment, and other things like that, to me, and also a certain unpredictability to it, is a big deal for me. So examining that feature of your game as an ongoing design task is, I think, really important.
Right.
In this game in particular, because you want furious action sequences where everybody swallows hard, goes for it, and we're just not sure if that lantern's going to get knocked over before or after this other thing happens.
Right.
And that's a big deal. I mean, in many role-playing games, you have, theoretically, it would be very tense, but the fact that we all rolled initiative and now we're going to go in that order means, well, okay, we know.
Yeah.
And it's very pro forma, to go through the actual actions. There are others where things are a little bit more flexible, but again, a lot of that flexibility begins with that linearity and then modifies it. And that can be done well or badly. There are other options too. So whatever it is, because I need to go back and review the text of Heroic Dark for this, but it might be good to just keep that in mind and trying to loosen up your thinking about that as you continue.
Yeah, I didn't really challenge the design there because I've rarely worried about the linear stack, because usually there's uncertainty in the events that happen. Like, yes, that person's going to be able to, based on the initiative order, we know that the person who wants to knock over the lantern is going to go first, but we don't know if they're going to make it to the lantern in time.
Okay.
Or also other characters have reactive powers where they can interrupt.
That's the important thing I'm looking at. The interruptive reactive phenomena is actually quite a big deal.
Yeah.
So yes, let's take a look at that and see about just what I'm saying is watching it in play.
Yeah.
And seeing whether players are acting upon it in such a fashion that you get some outcomes that really are very compelling because they were made by decisions in the moment while you went.
Yeah.
So that's that's kind of, I think, worth keeping in mind.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah. All right, man. Kind of short, but that was really punchy. Maybe
Yeah.
maybe we'll call that a win.
Yeah.
And move on. So so great. Take care.
All right, cool.
I'm enjoying putting these up for people to look at, and I'm hoping to do a group discussion via the Patreon of this consult as a whole.
Yeah.
You know, and say, look what we did, look what we went over. Okay, is the process of how this, you know, game coming together, and see if any other people have games that they're working on, and see if they were able to learn from it.
Right.
That's what I'm aiming at too. So
okay, cool.
yeah,
Great.
Talk to you later.
All right. Yeah. See ya. Bye.